Good evening. It's social distancing at the Arizona Chamber, also known as Happy Hour with Hammer. As always, we are joined by our CEO, Glenn Hammer. Glenn, tonight's show has an international flair. Why don't you introduce our special guest?
Well, this is a real treat, Garrick. It's a good friend and a former colleague of mine, David Wortmann, coming to us from Germany. In a past life, I worked with David when I worked in the solar industry with First Solar. And David is one of the world's, I'm not just talking Germany or Europe, I'm talking one of the world's top experts when it comes to clean tech. And right now has a company that helps others move forward productively in this very, very important area. David, great to see you again.
Well, it's really a pleasure to see you, and to a very, I think it's quite funny because now, since everybody's in the social distancing mode across the globe, we even come closer now because we actually have this Zoom call now, right? Otherwise, we would not have had this Zoom call.
Well, what's been great is through also things like WhatsApp, we've been able to keep in touch, and David's been kind enough to keep me up to date with what's going on in Germany. Now, most of the materials are in German, so we have to get them translated, but extremely helpful as we deal with this global pandemic here in Arizona. One thing I just wanted to ask, right out of the bat, it seems that there's a sort of a worldwide movement now to open things up in different stages, and would just like to get the lay of the land in Germany, which most in the world look at as one of the top countries in terms of being able to keep the deaths and the illness to much lower levels than most other countries.
Yeah, so I mean, like everybody else, Germany got hit with this pandemic, and the first measurements to close down took place around mid of March. Now we're mid of May. So we had a very long period of really everything, closing down, shutting down, locking down. Not like, for example, in Spain or in France or in Italy, there was never a rule that people had to stay at home. So we were not really forced to stay at home, but we were suggested to stay at home. And we had to fulfill a couple of rules when we were walking around publicly. So one of these rules was that you were only able to be outside with a family member. Of course, everybody who had the chance to do home offices, they had to stay at home or work at home, but everybody still could go shopping. And pretty soon there was a rule set up that if you're in public, if you're in offices, if you go shopping, that you have to keep a distance of 1.5 meters. So like last week, the first things opened up again. So the rules are not that strict anymore. So we have a new set of rules which need to be fulfilled until June 5th. So for the next 3 weeks. And the main rule still is that people need to stay apart 1.5 meters. But now, in addition to what we were able to do in the past, we are able to move around not only with just one member of the family, but you could also move around with a different family, which is not really part of your own family. So they extend the possibilities to move around. There was another rule. I mean, there are a number of rules. I don't know if you want me to go into details
Sure.
with all of these things now, but maybe just one general thing was as well proposed a couple of weeks ago that stores up until 800 square meters were able to open up. Now this rule is not there anymore, so basically everybody can open up again, but these stores have to fulfill certain regulations that not as many people can enter a store. For example, the distance of 1.5 meters still needs to be kept, etc., etc. So things are smoothly, easing up a little bit. But of course, we are still living under the conditions of this pandemic right now.
How about things like face masks when people are out in public? Is that the norm right now? Is that a requirement?
Yes, it is. It is the norm right now. Interestingly, I mean, Germany is a federal, country just like the US as well, where the central government can set some rules, but the federal states they can set other rules as well. So the central government out of Berlin did not make the rule that everybody has to wear masks. It was just suggested. But after this announcement of Chancellor Merkel last week, in the last couple of days, the different member states or federal states, we have 16 in Germany, they basically all decided when you are entering a shop that you have to wear masks. But in public, not really, because you move freely, under the air, you still keep a distance of 1.5 meters. There's no requirements, but in stores there are now.
I read that early in the outbreak, Germany was a leader in something called contact tracing, really tracking down those who were infected and reaching out to those who might also be exposed. And that was early on, I believe, one of the things that helped keep the infections to a minimum. Is that system still more or less in place in Germany, or?
I mean, this probably was true in the beginning where we had a few cases in Munich, some business travelers coming from China, but also some travelers doing their vacation in Austria, going skiing. And there was one, specific area in Austria where there was a huge outbreak. So some people got this into Germany, and then at time we also are in the carnival time. We were also in the carnival time, so a lot of people came together to do the carnival festivity in North Rhine-Westphalia, and this is where things really, where things really got out of hand. And so since then, it's not really possible to track everybody. But this is actually the objective of the government right now, to get down the number of infections so much that you can actually trace again every single infection. And this is where, this is the reason why, for example, the federal government told the federal states as well, you can open up, but once there are within a population of 100,000 inhabitants, more than 50 new infections, then you have to close down everything back again. So the government feels comfortable if you are below 50 new infections that you can then start tracing again. Another concept which Germany also is now starting to introduce is on a voluntary basis, an app which is helping to identify who was infected, who has been in contact with other people as well. And with this, they also try to get down the infections and try to trace everybody.
Now, before we went on the program, you mentioned that schools are reopening very soon.
Yes, so as of this week, basically, the federal states were able to open up schools again gradually. So the federal government said up until the summer break, every school student should be able to go back to school again. Not, of course, with the full schedule, but on a let's say on a limited schedule. And this week, actually, just 2 days ago, schools started to open up. And interestingly here, some federal states they have a general rule for every school. I, for example, live in Berlin. My kids go to school in Berlin, and the Berlin Senate, the Berlin government told the schools that everybody can make their own decisions how to open up. So you see different schools dealing with the situation differently. But the overall idea is still to keep the distance. So just from a practical point of view, for example, in the kids in the school of my kids, they only allow 12 students in one room. They only have 3 hours instead of 6 or 7 hours of school. They are only able to enter the school from one entrance and exit, on another door. Parents are not allowed around the school. So they really try to put in place a lot of measurements. We don't know if this is going to work. So this, like every other measurements, we need to see whether this works after 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, I'll just say it's been way too long since I've been to Berlin, which is one of the world's great cities. I mean, it's just, we had some good times there. I'll just say that. It was just a marvelous.
That's true. But Phoenix is a marvelous city as well. So, I mean, it's, and of course, the US, it's a great country as well. So
what I always love is when our friends from Germany come to Arizona and that sun, the Grand Canyon, that sun, it's just, it almost seemed to be like a spiritual experience, not just from you, but just from some of our other friends who would visit the desert. It's a different climate.
It is, yes.
And we had some nonstop flights that I'm sure will come back into Frankfurt from Phoenix before this struck. One other thing, and then I'll see if Garrick has a couple questions, was I've read that Germany now is talking about perhaps opening up the borders for other European travel. Is there something going on there that might start happening in the near future?
With regards to traveling?
Outside of Germany.
Outside of Germany. Well, technically you are allowed to travel, but when you come back from certain countries, you have to stay within, like 2 weeks of what's it called in English?
A quarantine.
A quarantine,
yeah.
That's right. A quarantine.
We have similar things.
Yeah, so, and there are still countries which really have locked down their borders. For example, the Czech Republic, though it's still a member of the European Union, they have locked down, I think, up until July, which is interesting because Europe is the place of free movement, right? So there are a lot of discussions going around as well, whether this is against the law or in favor of the law. But I think there are so many things right now. Nobody really thought that rules like this would happening, but I think there's a general understanding that all of this is needed. But people are not really traveling right now. Obviously, you hardly see any airplanes in the sky. It's you have very beautiful blue skies over here at the moment, and so what I assume is that probably most of the travel will concentrate to Germany and will be internal traveling this year.
Yeah, probably the same here. Garrick, any questions for
David? David, a question about testing. Can anybody in Germany get tested, or is it limited for individuals who are showing symptoms?
Well, I mean, technically everybody could get tested, and but the amount of testing capacities are not really there yet. I don't have the correct number right now with me, but the testing capacities are really going up, and testing is really crucial as well. I think we have the capacity of, well, let me not speculate around a specific number. Maybe I can send it to you a little later. But the capacities are really, really growing at the moment. But doctors tell you not to get tested unless you really see symptoms, because they just don't have enough, testing capacities right now. So in general, doctors, nurses, people of with critical jobs, they have the access to these tests.
Well, and that sounds similar to what we're experiencing as far as individuals with symptoms versus without symptoms.
Yeah, that's been the norm here.
Yeah, David, our governor in our state announced yesterday that professional sports can begin again. That's obviously up to the leagues if they're continuing. Your top flight soccer league is coming back in, well, you tell us, is it in a limited fashion without fans, we should assume?
Well, I mean, this was a big shock, obviously, to the German Soccer League to shut down, and not just to the fans who really enjoy these games, but also because of economic reasons, right? Because soccer and football is a very big business factor in Germany. So there is the rule now from the federal government that you could actually opening up again these games. The first league and the second league. As of basically right now, it says the second half of May. However, the associations around soccer, they have to demonstrate a convincing concept, which is also fulfilling all the general regulations, and then they have to get approval for that, and then they can basically start again. But I have not seen any of these concepts yet. They might be there already, but I think they're all working on it, and it's probably very difficult as well to fulfill them with a lot of people coming together, which would be technically not really possible. But because up until the end of August, every big event, whether it's culturally a sport event, where a lot of people are coming together, trade shows, etc., are not allowed.
Well, we're hoping to see some of the sports leagues safely start to reopen. So right now, for me, it's just South Korean baseball and baseball from Taiwan. So I'm looking for Germany and the United States to safely, probably without fans, to start.
Yes.
Yes. I think it would be good for the psyche of the world. Sports seems to be something that could bring us all a little bit closer.
Yes. So things are really, I think this is a new experience for everybody, right? For businesses, for the whole cultural sector, in particular, the cultural sector is really suffering around that, because there's not a sector where people, earn a lot of money, but still a lot of people involved in that. So there were a lot of fundings already provided by the German government in support of these small businesses. Germany has also this instrument which is called, short labor or something like this, where unlike in some other countries, companies are not forced to lay off their people, but they can apply for government support. So the employees stay basically on board. They are still getting up to 67% of their salaries. Now this actually is changing now towards the next couple of months. They are thinking about increasing this up to 80% of their salaries. So you as somebody employing people, you don't have to pay the full payrolls. And the government is supporting this. This really allows you for temporary time, couple of months, to keep everybody on board, and then when the economy is getting back, you don't need to rehire the people, but they really stayed on board, which is really a very convenient thing to do. And I think the numbers are around 10 million people are in short labor at the moment, which is quite a significant high number.
No, and I appreciate that, because we've been looking, our Congress has passed some good programs, one called the Paycheck Protection Program that has helped very similar way to help small businesses in particular bridge the period. Because what we try to explain is that this is a natural disaster that's hit every state in the country and every country in the world. I'm sorry, every state in our country and every country in the world. So, best practices, as we bridge this, and the program in Germany looks very good. I think the UK has some sort of program, maybe some of the other European nations, but it seems that Germany's is best in class from what I've read. So I want to dig into that a little bit deeper when, as we go forward with different congressional efforts.
Yes. I mean, I think probably every country had to find their own way a little bit because structures are different, societies are built up a little bit different. You probably also have cultural differences as well, which you need to recognize. I mean, Sweden is very often an example quoted, probably in the US as well, where there was basically no lockdown, but the situation is totally different, right? I mean, Sweden is a country of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 million people. It's a very, based on per capita, it's a very huge country. People are not living that dense together. Germany is a very heavy populated country. We have around 84 million people living here, and then you have places like Berlin, but in the US as well, right? I mean, you have
New York
areas
City.
like New York, New York City, which is totally different than, I don't know, some places in Alaska. So I think this is where I think it's very good, and your initiative is very good as well to come together and to learn from each other. But probably everybody needs to find their own way a little bit, depending the circumstances.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. And I just appreciate what you've done over the years. Before you were involved in this area, it was more likely to see a UFO coming into Phoenix than a solar panel. And, your work really helped change all that. And it's just, it's accelerated really beautifully across the country and the world. So, I'm just glad you're still at it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is, I don't know if we want to touch this topic here, but just maybe let me say this briefly.
Sure.
I think everybody talks about flattening the curve, trying to keep down the way of how this virus is spread around, and to keep it below a certain threshold. And we need to also flatten the curve when it comes to the CO2 emissions, because we have planetary boundaries as well. And there's only a certain amount of CO2 which we can allow to let go into the atmosphere. And so this is probably another task, trying to flatten that curve as well. So maybe humanity, maybe we all are learning from that as well. I know these topics are viewed differently as well in some areas around the globe, but this is basically the main driver why we need to have solar energy and renewables as well. Right?
Well, we're definitely going to have a lot more solar and renewables in Arizona, and your work really lit a fuse in a very positive way. In fact, I believe our largest utility, a month or so ago, a few months, I've lost track of time. There's no such thing as time, announced a plan to go carbon free by 2050. So some different dynamics. Nuclear will be part of that mix. I know that's not, the case in Germany, but the point is that that's, that ship is going in that direction rapidly across the world. And from my perspective, the more we can collaborate, particularly with friends from Germany and countries where there's similar values, the better we're all going to be. Whether it's the environment, healthcare, and those do intersect as well.
I mean, I think something which is teaching us here is, the global, it's the global, people, and at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters, right? It's not about one country or the other country. We're just one people on this planet, and I think what this virus probably has told us as well, that it still things are very vulnerable, so things can really fall apart, and we, at least over here, we had very prosperous. I don't know, a couple of years, the economy was booming, a lot of people were employed. So everybody was well off and things were moving smoothly. Of course, you still have these global conflicts here and there. But I think there was a big feel of comfort, probably among many people, at least in the Western civilization, that things just go into the right direction. But this virus really hit us all, right? I think what it really tells us that things are vulnerable, and we need to recognize that we are part of a system, and we need to recognize that this system can fall apart as well. So there's not just this environmental reason to protect, I don't know, the global atmosphere, for example, but these are really economic reasons to do this, right? These are social reasons to do it, so it's everything is interlinked, right?
It interlinked for sure in a way that I don't believe any of us could have imagined. And David, I hope to see you soon again in Arizona. I hope to soon have the chance to return to one of the great cities and great countries on the planet. So I just hope that you and your family stay well as we all work through this global pandemic together.
Yes, I wish you the same, and let's please stay in contact, learn from each other, and we will get through this. This will pass, and like every crisis, we should seize the opportunity out of this as well. And I think there are a lot of opportunities out there.
David, thank you. Very well said.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Glenn. Folks, we will see you on our next episode.